Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. It has been brought to my attention that all of you who watch and comment on my videos have watched my ranking videos and been kindly leaving comments about the fact that I've left out all of the class archetypes. Not the multi-class archetypes, that's a whole other video series. These are the class archetypes. These could be ranked alongside subclasses, and I just haven't been doing that because they aren't really subclasses, but they do take that slot sometimes. Anyway, so because there's so much interest, I decided let's go ahead and catch up with all of the classes that have class archetypes that I did not add in. So we're going to jump in and fill in those along with their rest of the ranks, so you can see how it ranks along all the subclasses that I've already done. Some of these class archetypes, by the way, are actually legacy at this point, but because they were brought up, I did still want to go ahead and hit them. So yes, they will probably get remastered at some point. They may not, but we're going to get them done anyway because you can still use all the legacy material. So if you want them, why not use them? What I will not be doing, though, is ranking anything that comes from adventure paths. So I skipped those when I did the subclasses as well. I really am focusing on rule books here, and that's what I'm going to continue going with. So sticking with rule books, we're just going to go ahead and hit those class archetypes now. But first we have to talk about what is a class archetype. Class archetypes are a combination of archetype and subclass most of the time. They take up the subclass slot for like the martial ones. However, we're going to talk about some spellcaster ones that don't actually do that. But either way, they're going to take up the dedication slot for your level 2 class feat, or if you're doing free archetype, that free archetype slot. And therefore, you're tied into a dedication that you have to take feats from that dedication before you can take another dedication. Pretty standard stuff there. So it really is a combination of class and archetype. Class archetype. Named well. Good job. But because they're going to take up your archetype slot and possibly your subclass, possibly not, or they'll change around your class in a way, they do have an extra hurdle to get over versus standard subclasses because you're going to alter your base class in some way as well and take up future options away from them that otherwise they would have. So just keep that in mind. When I'm ranking these, I am keeping that hurdle in mind. Sometimes it may not feel like a hurdle at all. Sometimes it definitely will. And now that we've established all that, let's go ahead and talk criteria. These are my standard criteria for ranking because it is going against the ranking I've already done. So if you know this, go ahead and skip ahead. I'll have it on the timeline. Otherwise, feel free to listen as we talk about what the different ranks mean to me. S, this is a class archetype in this case that is clearly mechanically stronger for combat than the other subclasses or class archetypes that are in here, while not falling behind in other pillars of play because this is about more than just combat. Basically, this is a subclass that almost feels like the default or the right way to play the class. It's that strong. PF2 largely avoids this, but it does come up and it has before. A is a subclass that will be strong in combat and any adventure. It's not only strong on its own, but it usually makes the team stronger as well. Remember, this is a cooperative game, so you want to make everybody better. And this is also a class archetype that leans into the strengths of the class, including any social or exploration. B is a subclass class archetype that is mechanically strong on its own or does a good job of boosting the rest of the party, but usually not both. It's usually one or the other. And it may be strong in certain campaigns more than others, but at least it does have those that it leans well into. It may also land here because it just doesn't do a good job of leaning into what the class is best at. C is a subclass that lands here because it's not strong in combat really necessarily in any campaign, or at least no better than the base class without a subclass. It might not take advantage of what the class is best at or its specialty, but it can still be played and you can still be effective with it. D is something you probably should just avoid. It either actively detracts from the base class in some way, or it at least baits the player into a playstyle that doesn't feel rewarding or doesn't play well with the rest of what the class offers with its features. There's really nothing advantageous about taking this class archetype or subclass or whatever. Fantastic. We are going to go ahead and do this alphabetically because apparently that's a thing that I've got that's just a problem for me not to do, so but this time we're going to do it alphabetically by class that I've gone through rather than by the name of the class archetype because my brain has to fight over those and I'm going with the class. So, because I don't have anything for Alchemist, there's no class archetypes there and we've covered all the subclasses, we're going to go ahead and jump into the Barbarian, which does have one class archetype that we didn't cover, and that is the Bloodrager. What is it with the Bloodrager? Well, this is one of those class archetypes that I talked about that gives you both your subclass and it's going to take your dedication slot at level 2. So let's talk about what the subclass part of it gives you. A reminder, barbarians get some stuff up front at level 1. It usually affects your rage damage and maybe has some other riders along with it. And then at level 7, you get the specialization ability that also increases at level 15. And finally, at level 9, you get your raging resistance. So we'll talk about all of those here. In this case, we have no anathema, so you're good to go on that. Your rage damage itself, the base 2, actually doesn't increase at level 1. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to add half your rage damage as persistent bleed damage as well when you hit. And also, the rider here is a big one. If you cast a spell with a spell attack roll, so not a save, it has to have an attack roll, you add your rage damage bonus to the damage even if you miss. So if I fire a cantrip at you, for instance, and I completely whiff, you're still going to take 2 damage from the rage damage bonus, even at level 1. So clearly we're leaning into combat that includes spellcasting, which for barbarians, as you're aware, is normally a thing, because barbarians have a problem casting spells, anything with a concentrate, which spells generally have. So this is interesting. We're already leaning into something that barbarians don't normally do. At level 7, your specialization ability, your rage damage goes from 2 to 4, and then this will go to 4 to 8 at level 15. Don't forget though, as it goes from 2 to 4, that means your persistent bleed goes from 1 to 2. And then at 15th level, it'll go up to 4 persistent bleed damage. So you are getting that added in, don't forget that. And your raging resistance at level 9. You gain resistance to slashing and bleeding, and to creatures whose blood you last drank. Don't worry, this will make sense. I didn't just make that up out of nowhere. Okay, so there's our base for the subclass. And we're going to get into the feats, but the feats aren't just normal class feats. They are tied to the dedication. So we should probably cover the dedication that you have to have at level 2. Again, if you're doing free archetype, this will fill your free archetype slot. If you're not, this is going to take your level 2 barbarian feat slot, your class feat. So first you choose arcane or divine. Then you're going to get 2 cantrips from that tradition. At least one has to be an attack roll cantrip. The spell attack modifier and DC are going to be based off of your charisma, which is very similar to, how innate spellcasting works. So if you end up with innate spells, this could be the barbarian that can use those, so that's good. Your repertoire spells gain the rage trait so that you can actually cast them while raging. So remember, if something has the rage trait, you don't have to worry about other issues with rage. Unfortunately, when you do cast a spell, you become drained 1 or increase your drain value by 1, and drained is painful. The only way to reduce it is to harvest blood, which is an action I'm going to get to in a second here, that you get as part of the dedication. Finally, depending on the tradition you chose, you'll be trained in either Arcana or Religion to their respective spell types. So what is Harvest Blood? Well, Harvest Blood you get for free when you get the dedication. This is 1 action, and if your last action was a successful piercing or slashing attack, so you're probably not using bludgeoning weapons with this setup, your drained condition reduces by 1. You gain temporary hit points equal to your con mod, and you have a +1 bonus to saves against spells from the target of drinking blood for 1 minute, or until you use this on a different creature. So if you're going to go up against spellcasters, hit them, drink their blood, and suddenly you're going to do a lot better job at saving against their spells. Cool. So that's Harvest Blood. Remember, you're going to need that to reduce your drained value you get if you cast spells. And we're up to the feats. So Bloodrager actually has 10 feats that are associated with this class archetype. Starting off at level 4 with Blood Calls Blood. This is a reaction. If you fail a flat check to cast a spell because, somebody used Reactive Strike and it failed, you failed your flat check or whatever, or a creature does something that stops you from casting in a different way, counterspell or something, you can instead just succeed. So you use your reaction and you succeed at casting the spell. You do become or increase your drain value by 1 though for using this reaction. So you get 1 for casting, 1 for the reaction. So do keep that in mind, but really nobody can stop you from casting a spell. Rising Blood Magic, this is level 4. You gain the basic spellcasting feature that I've talked about in my multi-class archetype videos. This is a standard archetype thing where you're going to get access to level 1, 2, and 3 spells with spell slots over various levels here. You're not going to get it all here at level 4, but you are going to get spell slots. This will continue to use your charisma, and it'll be arcane or divine depending on what you chose with the initial choice with this class. So one special thing for you is that in your case you get to add 1 more rage damage to spell damage if you're at least drained 1 when you cast. So if you are drained 1, you haven't reduced it down to 0, and you cast a spell with a spell slot, now you're going to get to add more rage bonus damage onto the damage that you would do with the spell. And this doesn't specify, so this could be an area 1, potentially not just an attack roll. Split Shot. Level 4, 1 action. If your next action is to cast a targeted spell with no duration, so spell target, just like you do with a lot of cantrips, there are good level 1 and 2 spells that do this, by the way. Mostly low-level spells, though. You can choose a second target in range. You roll once for the attack and compare it to both. If it hits both, though, you're going to deal only half damage to the second and no additional riders from the spell, but it does let you add more damage to your one spell, and it might be a better use of your one action than you might have to do otherwise on your turn. Siphon Magic, level 6 now, 1 action. If your last action was to harvest blood against a creature that casts spells, you regain an expended spell slot, but it can't be your highest. Then, like usual, you gain or increase your drain level. Always playing with drained in this one. But it could be good to get back, like, you know, if you've got up to 5th level slots, getting a 4th level slot back is actually pretty strong for 1 action, because other classes can't do this and there's no restriction on it. But you do have to be going after a creature that can cast spells. Dispel Strikes, level 8, free action. Your last action was to cast a non-cantrip spell, so one with your spell slots. You then put power into your attacks, adding 1d6 force damage or a damage type related to the spell you cast until the end of your next turn, getting to combo finally the spells and melee damage that you probably were doing anyway. Spell Drinker, level 8, 1 action. You have taken the Rising Blood Magic, so you already have, you know, spell slots you can use. And your last action was Harvest Blood, and you can only do this once per hour. Then you get a 3rd rank spell available to you temporarily. If you have Surging Blood Magic, which is the higher version, then this can be a 4th rank spell, and if you have an Exultant, it will be a 7th rank spell. So depending on what level of spellcasting you have, you're getting different levels of spell slots back. Hemocritical, level 10, free action. Your last action was a critical hit to a creature that can bleed, because definitely some can't. If your next action is to cast a spell, you get either to roll twice and take the better if it's a spell attack roll, or if it's a spell with a saving throw, the enemy you target, or one enemy you target, I should say, gets to roll twice and take the lower. Energy Ward, level 12. This is a free action. Your last action was to cast a non-cantrip spell that dealt energy damage. So energy damage, you know, electricity, acid, fire, cold. You gain resistance to one type of energy damage equal to 4 plus the spell level, which is actually a decent amount of resistance. Rising Blood Magic, level 12. This moves your spellcasting from basic to expert. It'll get you higher spell slots, and your rage damage that's added to spells cast with spell slots goes from 1 to 3. And finally, Exultant Blood Magic. You gain Master Spellcasting, which moves, again, from expert to master, so your training's higher, better DCs, better attack rolls, and you're going to get higher level spell slots. And finally, you get to double the rage damage bonus that your spells are doing, but you must be at least drained 2 in order to get that to happen, increasing yourself to drain 3. This is kind of a crazy class archetype. If you really want to be a Gish Barbarian, this is pretty much the right and only way to pull it off, I think. You can. There's a feat you can take, but it takes an action to set up. Anyway, this is really the way to play a Gish Barbarian if you're going to do it. It's important to remember how Drained works, though. So, first, you get a penalty to your Fortitude saves equal to the value of Drain. So, Drain 3, you get a -3 to Fort saves. Then, your current and max hit points drop by your level times the value. So, if you were Drained 3, for instance, and you're level 10, your max HP and current HP drop by 30. That's crazy. So this is a huge downside to this class archetype. Now, when you lose the Drained, your max HP go up, but your current HP don't. So don't think you're just going to suddenly yo-yo your hit points. They're just down. So with that downside, plus you've got the fact that you've got a forced dedication on you, taking up that either class feature slot or your free archetype. And while I'm on the negatives, the fact that rage damage increases really terribly doesn't help with your melee strikes. Yes, you get the persistent bleed damage, but when you play a class like this, you're going to be hitting hard, probably taking things out in, you know, either one hit because you're finishing them off or really dropping them low. The persistent bleed isn't going to mean much. Then there's Harvest Blood. This is obviously a required mechanic because of how they built it to reduce your drain value, but the spellcasting buff just may not come up much. So if you're not going after spellcasters all the time, this is going to feel kind of wasted. I do like the temp HP refresh, though, since it does help with some of the lost hit points from the drain condition, and that's great. Then we have the dedication and the feats. The spellcasting here is solid. Like, just getting the spellcasting that builds up like spellcasting normally does for multi-class archetypes makes the spellcasting actually really strong here. You get like full caster style of multi-class archetype stuff, as well as feats outside of that that you can take to fill in all the gaps. Adding in that slight rage bonus to your spells was actually a nice touch. It is important to remember that not many spells, especially as you raise in level, really target creatures anymore. That's really a low-level spell thing. There are some, I'm not saying there aren't any, but it's pretty slim pickings the further you go up. Many of the feats in here actually are pretty strong if you're going to weave together spells with physical damage. And if you're not going to do that, I'm not quite sure why you took this. So good feats for what it's trying to set up. It may be hard to pull off attacks and spells in the same turn. Keep in mind, most spells take 2 actions to cast. Your attack's going to take 1. That doesn't really leave a lot of space for movement. So keep that in mind. You might be a bit action-starved trying to pull all of this off. But again, it could be a lot of fun. If this is what you want, if this is the playstyle you want, you can weave this together using this class archetype. The final word of caution is that this build means you get to go hard on both strength and charisma. That won't leave a lot of space for constitution, reducing your hit points even further. So barbarians have a lot with their d12, yes, but if you only got a +1 in con, where they might normally have a +3, that's going to hurt you a lot. Even with all of those downsides, if you can find a good pattern of play, I do think, because it does something that barbarians normally can't, and it offers you a lot of value with the spell casting because it doesn't have to just be in combat. You can actually do out of combat spells if you really want to, making drain sometimes maybe easier or harder. It's hard to say to get rid of, but I still think this is a solid A, actually. I think it sits with some of the best in Barbarian. I know it can be a struggle, and boy, that drain could really be a downside for you. You just have to find that good pattern, and then I think if you want that Gish, this is a great Gish way to play. All right, that's one of our, what do we have, 9 in here down? This is going to be a long video. Next up is the Bard class archetype, but it's not only for the Bard. No, this class archetype called Wellspring Magic, it's actually for any caster, full caster, with a spell repertoire. This means that it's for spontaneous casters, so the ranking I give to Bard will probably be, for the most part, what it ends up being for those other spellcasters. Maybe not true, because every class is a little different, but probably. So what do you get for Wellspring Bard? First, you get a reduction to your allotted spell slots per day, 1 less at each spell level. But when you roll initiative, you get to make a flat check against a DC of 6, and if you succeed, you get access to reuse a spell slot that you've already used, of any level. Well, that's, I guess, on a crit succeed. If you don't use this within a minute, then you're going to lose it, and you're going to have what's called a Wellspring Surge, which we will explain. On a success on that flat check, rather than a crit success, you'll get a random slot between your highest 3 levels. So make sure you've used some spells so you can get something back. And you only get 3 rounds to use it. Finally, if you fail, or critically fail, you're going to get a random slot again for those top 3, and you still have those 3 rounds to use it, but you're going to trigger a Wellspring Surge immediately. Which means, before we go any further, we should probably talk about what a Wellspring Surge is all about. Well, have you ever played the Wild, or read about, the Wild Magic Sorcerer in D&D 5e? Yeah, it's pretty much that general idea. You're going to have a table, but this is a table of only 20 options. You're going to roll a d20 when you get a Wellspring Surge. Whatever is on that table at that point, that's what's going to happen. And generally speaking, it's going to happen from you, but not an emanation. This is going to be a burst from you. That matters. We'll get there. If they remaster this, I'll make a whole video on it because there's a whole lot of content here. I'm not going to jump through the whole Wellspring table. I'll show it, sure, but we're not diving into it to really evaluate all the things that can happen. However, there are some things that are good on average. There's some things that aren't so good on average. It kind of depends on where you are when this triggers. If you're doing it during initiative, that's going to be different than if you trigger it later on, which we'll talk about how that can happen. So it varies a bit. Good and bad, we'll call it a split. Before we get to the feats tied to the dedication, it's important to know that in this case, you still get to choose a subclass at level 1. So while this will take your dedication slot for your class feat at level 2, or for your archetype if you're doing that, you still get a subclass. So it's a little less restrictive than what we saw with our Barbarian. So what are those feats? Well, we've got Wellspring Control at level 4, and this one's important, I think. When you roll a Wellspring surge, you get to roll twice and choose which effect you use. This doesn't count if you force a different creature to trigger Wellspring Surge, which will happen. So, giving you more control immediately at level 4 is probably a necessary take. Urgent Upwelling, level 6, this is a reaction, once per 10 minutes. If you are critically hit or dropped to 0 but not killed outright, or crit fail a save, you can Wellspring Surge. Only this time, instead of getting a slot back, you're going to have the surge originate from the enemy that triggered all of this, which you'll see looking at the table is good or bad depending. Energetic Resonance, level 8 reaction. If you're about to take energy damage from a spell, and we've talked about what that is, I put the list of energy here, expend a spell slot of the damaging spell level or higher and gain resistance to the incoming damage by twice the level of the spell slot. That's a lot. You're using resources, probably not reducing it by a ton. I'm not sure I love this. Spell Relay, level 8. Reaction, if any ally casts a spell and you are within its range, you can allow your ally to have their spell originate from your location instead. Could be kind of cool, especially if you don't have a lot of uses for your action. Surging Might, level 10, 1 action. This is a spell shape that lets you have your next spell bypass certain resistances, but only to things like good and evil or positive, negative was the old terminology. Given the remaster, it probably makes sense to ignore resistance for holy and unholy and void vitality, but that's kind of up to the table since the wording here is very specific. Interfering Surge, level 12, this is a reaction. This is really just kind of counterspell the low-level feat that you can take, but it has a rider where if you succeed at countering the spell, you cause a surge originating from the enemy, which is probably the best time to originate a surge, if I'm being honest. Now, if you fail, a surge originates from you, so make sure you can counterspell. Or you're surrounded by things you don't mind hurting, which is probably what's going to happen with your surge a lot of the time. Scintillating Spell, level 16, 1 action. This is another spell shape, and it basically makes your damaging AoE spells also cause the dazzled or blinded condition on a fail or crit fail, respectively. Those are nice conditions. This is actually a pretty good spell shape, just generally speaking. Echoing Spell, level 18, 1 action. If your next action is to cast a spell of 4th level or lower, you can cast it again next turn without expending a spell slot. And there are some really good spells of 4th or lower. Things like a 3rd level Fear that can target a whole bunch of characters. Nice. This is certainly an interesting one, and different from, obviously, the Barbarian, as you still get to choose a subclass. You get everything that goes along with that subclass. So let's get the obvious downside out of the way. You have fewer spell slots per day. That's not good. But how bad is it, really, is the question. Well, that really depends on the GM and how your table runs. If you only have 2 combats per day, or per long rest, I should say, then it's a downside that probably won't even come up. But if you have 5 per day, this may be a huge hindrance to you. The way I run games, a player probably wouldn't even notice, honestly. Well, maybe a little bit. There's a couple of times that we've really pushed the envelope, but a lot of the time, they probably wouldn't be in a bad place with this. So maybe it's then okay. Then we have the Wellspring Surges. The effects there are interesting because a lot of them, if you were surrounded by enemies, you'd feel good about. Some damage, some control stuff, but you're almost always triggering this, at least the majority of the time early on, during initiative where you don't want to hit your friends. I mean, you can take that level 4 feat, so that's more likely to get one of the good effects because there are positive ones, but it is a little bit iffy. Honestly, though, especially if you're rolling twice, probably about 75% of the time you can end up in a decent case, and if you're surrounded by enemies, you'll certainly be in a decent case. The feats don't exactly blow me away, though, and being a combination of, somewhat interesting feats, some of them are strong, but they're usually the higher level ones. Other ones are too situational, I think, a lot of the time. The strongest feat is the level 4 one, honestly, probably, getting to roll twice. But with the kind of so-so stuff on the table, having positive and negative effects, you could just harm your team as much as you help them. Some situational natures here and the loss of spell slots. This is a C for me when I'm really looking at what the Bard already does. I don't think this helps the Bard in any significant way. And yes, I know it doesn't actually interfere with their subclass, so maybe it's unfair to rank it in the same thing, but I've committed to this, so I'm doing this. Can it fit on a certain character? Yes. Can it be fun? Absolutely. So I think people should absolutely think about playing this, kind of like I thought they should play the, martial bard style, right? The warrior, even though that one got a poor ranking. They're very fun. They're very cool, and I'd still play it, but it's just not great. So that wasn't the last time that we'll see this kind of class archetype. With that in mind, the Druid and the Elementalist. Let me start by saying that this is a remastered class archetype. The previous version was called Elemental Magic, so we're not going to talk about that one. We're just ranking the new one. What is it all about? Well, this is for spellcasters that are arcane or primal only, and so we'll see this come up for some other classes, wizard, witch, sorcerer, things like that. So, expect it to pop up in plenty of ranking videos going forward. When you choose this class archetype, you will choose spells from a reduced list. So for Druid, for instance, you're still getting primal spells, only it's a subset of your primal spells. It's the elemental ones. Not surprising. You will also choose an elemental philosophy. This somewhat narrows the list even further because you're going to choose a set of traits for certain elements that you do use while leaving a couple other out. There's only 2 options here, and each has a different selection of elements. These traits will determine which spells, again, are available on your reduced list and some of the feats you can take. I'm showing them on screen now. There's not much to talk about. You can just read the traits that are different between them. So we talked about how this will hinder the spells you can choose from, but what do you get for the hassle? Well, for starters, you're going to get the dedication at level 2, because of course you do. With this dedication, you're going to choose one of the traits that's in your philosophy, and you're going to get resistance equal to half your level, minimum 1, to damage dealt to you by anything with that trait. So not just spells, it's things with that trait, which is great. So that actually does help make this resistance a little more valuable. Oh, and you get to choose it at the beginning of each day. It's not permanent, so if you know where you're going, this could be really great. Feats. We have Dowsing Spell at level 4. This is 1 action. It's a spell shape that either philosophy can use because they both have water in them. And on your next spell that you cast, your target is then soaked in water, which will help them get rid of persistent acid or fire damage, reducing the DC to 10 and letting them try to save immediately. So a nice little support thing. Elemental Familiar, level 4, you gain a familiar, but instead of just being an animal, this is an elemental, which, I'll put the list up here, but the elementals actually get special things added to them, like riders to being a familiar, which makes it kind of a cool, extra strong familiar in a way. Burning Spell, level 6, 1 action. Another spell shape, available to both philosophies, again, because they both have this trait required on them. So if your next spell is a damaging single target spell that deals fire damage, you're going to deal persistent fire damage equal to the level of the slot used. Current Spell, level 6, 1 action. Another spell shape, available to both philosophies. If your next action is casting a spell with air or water trait, or both, you get a +1 bonus to your AC or +2 against ranged attacks until the start of your next turn. This also gives you a bonus to saves against effects with that trait or traits, based on the spell you cast. So if it's got both water and air, you get resistance to both. A nice defensive spell shape. Expand Elemental Magic, level 6. This basically just makes it so that your philosophy has all the elements. So if you just don't want to be restricted anymore, boom, all the elements. Metabolize Element, level 8, reaction. When you take damage from a foe with one of the traits from your philosophy, you become quickened until the end of your next turn, but you can only use it to step or stride. That's not really a restriction, that's actually quite valuable. Water Step, level 8. As long as water is in your philosophy, you can run across water. But don't stop. If you stop on the water, you'll sink. But you can run across it. Growth Spell, level 10, 1 action. For philosophies with wood, this is a spell shape, as we've seen a lot of that. If your next action is a leveled spell with an area, you can expand it. Another 5 feet for a burst, 10 for a cone, and 15 for a line. And it gets the wood trait. Keep in mind, a 5 foot added onto a burst is actually a pretty large increase in size. 10 for a cone is a very large increase. 15 for a line is more what you expect. More of a linear increase. Reverberating Spell, level 10, 1 action. For philosophies with metal, this is a spell shape. Again, if your next action is a leveled spell with an area and it deals damage, you get to an extra 1d8 sonic to those who fail, and it deafens for a turn, or a minute if they critically fail, and then they'll be taking double damage. So, nice. Rock Slide Spell, level 10, 1 action. For philosophies with earth, spell shape, if your next action is a level spell with an area, you choose a number of contiguous affected squares, meaning they have to, share a side with each other, equal to the level of the spell. So a 4th level spell, you get 4 squares, and you make them difficult terrain for a round. Redirect Element, level 12, reaction. If you're targeted by a spell and it misses or critically misses, you get to redirect it, forcing the attacker to make a new attack roll against a target within the spell's range of your choice. The spell must have a trait in your philosophy to be able to do this, but forcing enemies to hurt enemies, that's pretty cool. And finally, Wind Tossed Spell, level 14, 1 action, Philosophies with Air. This is a spell shape. If your next action is casting a spell that uses an attack roll, you can ignore any cover or concealment your target has, meaning you're much more likely to land it. Okay, so that was mostly spell shapes. I think spell shapes can be good, but they need to have a really solid effect when you're going to choose them, and a lot of them can be very disappointing, honestly. That one extra action doesn't feel like it sometimes adds enough, sometimes it adds a lot. Casters are action starved as it is, so keep in mind that that one action can be a big tax here. Redirect may not come up much, but is phenomenal when it does. Just make sure that you're in the right campaign. As for Metabolize Element, it's slightly more likely to come up, and extra action economy is actually very valuable. Again, make sure you're in the right campaign. As for the spell shapes, some are fantastic, especially some of the ones related to the AoEs. Adding extra sonic damage with a rider or expanding the area can be honestly really huge. And the familiars are already good. And yes, you don't need an archetype to take it, especially as a druid, but getting the elemental and some of the riders that they have for theirs, it actually makes them really strong, I think, in certain ways. It won't be for everybody in every campaign, but it is a solid B. It offers quite a bit, and keep in mind that this doesn't have as big a hurdle to get over because it's not taking your subclass away from you, so you still have your subclass. It's just offering you more with your kind of elementally focused dedication. If you were going to do an elemental blaster anyway, this is kind of just great for that. So you're really not losing anything, which is another reason it's a B. It can just fit a lot of druid designs anyway. Believe it or not, we actually have another druid class archetype to talk about. That's right, and this one's again not specific to druids. It's called Flexible Spellcaster. This is legacy option, kind of like Wellspring was, and so it's worth discussing. This is for classes that are full casters, but they have to be prepared casters. And yes, this is going to reduce your spell slots. Yay! Okay, so wait, we know that's bad. Well, it can be. And instead of having 3 spell slots per level, long term you're going to have 2 spell slots per level. You also get 2 fewer cantrips that you can prepare each day. However, while you only get to prepare that many spells, this time you're going to get to have the slots and you're going to choose, so for level 2 you've got 2 spell slots, you're going to get to prepare 2 spells, but you don't have to say which slot they use. Instead, you get the flexibility of, I can use them for anything, including you can upcast them as you feel free. So you actually get the total freedom casting here that you want. You just have fewer spell slots to do it with. There are a few tweaks to come with how some of the features work. So we've got, wizards, right? They get 1 spell at each rank that's added by their subclass. That's still added there. You can't upcast those for free. That still can only be that 1 spell. You can't use that slot for anything else. Clerics, they get their ability to cast heal or harm. That still works the same way it did. It doesn't interact with any of this, so those things still work the same. And there are some restrictions to feats. This is where it affects druid. Things like Call of Wild or Elemental Summons, where you can kind of have this feat that lets you say, ooh, I want to swap in, summoning an animal or summoning an elemental instead of one of the spells I've got prepared. That doesn't work anymore, so those are taken away. I don't consider those a huge loss, at least for druids not really hurt by this. I don't think any of them really are. The only thing that the dedication at level 2 adds, you're going to have 3 cantrips prepared before, now you got 4 cantrips. And you go up to 5 at level 4. So you're just increasing your number of cantrips since they had already reduced it. And there are no feats. That's it. You might be asking, well, but I have to take so many feats to take another dedication. This doesn't work like that. In this case, you can just go ahead and take another dedication. It doesn't slow you down. It's just a speed bump, basically. It's just changing the way spell slots work for you, and that's about it. With that in mind, honestly, it really depends on how you play. I think for a lot of players, especially new to the system, this is fantastic. If you're deep into the system and you like the way Vancian spellcasting works, then it's maybe not as exciting. In any case, it doesn't really change much at all. So it's not revolutionizing Druid. It's not hindering it in any massive way. It's a decent B. It sits there. It's an option. Think about it. Take it if you want to. It's both good and bad. It's flexible. It fits. Yeah, so just consider it, and if you've got a new player, this might be a good way to direct them. All right, we kind of whipped through those pretty quickly, thankfully, so it won't take as long, but we have a few left to do, and let's jump in with the Gunslinger and the Spellshot. This follows a pattern from the Barbarian now, where you're going to get your subclass chosen, and you're going to get a dedication at level 2. So in this case, the way you get is the way of the Spellshot, no surprise. What does that give us? Well, the one thing it gives us outside of what we normally get from subclasses or ways for this the Gunslinger is you're going to use Intelligence for your class DC instead of using Dexterity for your class DC. So keep that in mind. This is an Intelligence adjacent class. It still doesn't mean that that's your primary ability score, but that's what your DC is based on. Your Sling is Reload, so for one action, you can recall knowledge while you reload. Your skill is Arcana. Your initial deed is called Energy Shot. This is a free action. When you roll initiative, you get to draw a gun or crossbow. The first 3 attacks you make deal 1 extra damage per weapon damage die of an energy type. Acid, cold, fire, electricity, which you choose when you fire. So you don't have to choose ahead of time or even when you roll initiative. If you recall knowledge and learn that this creature is now weak to acid, great. Choose when you shoot acid. So the first 3 shots. Your advanced deed, this is Recall Ammunition. It's a reaction. When you fire and miss with your gun or crossbow, you can use this reaction to pull the missed ammo back into your weapon, and it's ready to fire again. So it's a reaction reload when you miss, which is cool. Greater Deed is Dispelling Bullet. This is 2 actions. If you hit, you can attempt to counteract a magical effect on the target. I will link a good link to a video about counteracting rules. Again, they're not simple. So if you want to counteract, that way, just go watch that. I'm not going to describe it here. So that's your Greater Deed. Already we see some really interesting, potential, powerful stuff going on here with the features, but it's time to get into the feats, and starting with the Dedication, which gives you Wizard spellcasting benefits. So the Dedication benefits you get will be, you're going to get a spellbook, you're going to get some cantrips, you prepare 2 cantrips per day, and oddly, you also can take the Beast Gunner Dedication before you take 2 more Archetype feats, which is unique here too. And Beast Gunner's cool, but I'm not talking about it here. That'll be a whole different video. So what are some of those feats available? Basic Arcana, this is level 4, gives you access to level 1 and 2 Wizard feats. This is standard stuff from the multi-class Archetypes. Basic Wizard Spellcasting, again, from the multi-class Archetypes. I'm not going to run into it deeply here. I'll link my multi-class Archetype video, but you're going to get spell slots we talked about with Barbarian. Spell Woven Shot, level 4, 3 actions. This is Spell Strike for guns and crossbows, but with no cooldown. Yeah, it's only for use with spells with attack rolls that have 1 or 2 actions, but that's really cool. You still have to expend the spell slot to do it. If you build for this, this can be crazy. And of course, you can use it with cantrips, so you don't have to use spell slots. This is just good. Advanced Arcana, level 6, standard stuff, wizard feats, higher level. Fulminating Shot, level 6, 1 action. You infuse your next shot with the ability to deal 1d6 extra damage of 1 energy type listed in your initial deed. We talked about those. This goes up to 2d6 at 12th level and 3d6 at 18th level. So you want to set up for a stronger shot. Arcane Breadth, this is level 8, increases the number of spell slots you get from all but your 2 highest levels by 1. So you're going to get a lot more spell slots this way, especially if you take higher level casting. Call Gun, level 8. For 1 action, you're going to call your gun that you designated at the start of the day into an open hand of yours. It has to be somewhere on your person, though, for this class archetype, unless you have Beast Gunner, and then you can call it from, like, anywhere in the world. Expert Wizard Spellcasting, level 12. Your spellcasting goes from trained to expert, both your attack rolls and DC, and you're going to get more spell slots that go up to higher levels. Phase Bullet, level 14, 1 action, once per day. You make a shot that's targeting against a creature that is either hidden to you or has been observed. If it's undetected or anything like that, it doesn't count. You can't choose them. You get to ignore all cover, concealment, walls, whatever. As long as it's non-magical, you get to ignore it. Even a shield can't stop this. Raising shield can't reduce the damage. You even get a +4 to your attack roll if the creature's wearing armor. You are just going to hit them with this shot, which is why it's only once per day. And finally, Black Powder Embodiment, level 18, 2 actions. You take a shot at a creature up to 120 feet away. If you hit, you can teleport to anywhere within 10 feet of your target. Though why would you want to? You're a ranged character. I guess you're trying to chase somebody running away. Situational. Honestly, this is amazing. Yes, you need to build as much dex and int as you can, but you're not really hurting yourself here. Like losing a little bit of con or one of the other mental stats is probably completely fine here. The first 2 deeds are fantastic. The fact that it's the first 3 shots, not the first 1, adding the special damage to trigger any weaknesses is really strong. The reload is good because recall knowledge is really strong, especially when you have high intelligence and you're probably really good at recall knowledge. And then you get all of the spellcasting for wizards on top of that, which is just good. And Spellwoven Shot is like an increase over the standard spell strike that exists for the Magus. I mean, yes, you have to reload between, so you have to have an action downtime, so you're not going to do it every turn, but you can do it every other turn pretty reliably, actually. And I don't even think we can say that regularly about the Magus throughout an entire day. Lots of spell casting. Yes, you don't get expert, you don't get master, you only get up to expert, but solid. And if you really wanted to, later you can take the dedication from wizard and just take master anyway, so it wouldn't really stop you later on. Its options are so good, honestly, that as you level up and you're filling in your free archetype feats or just trying to take more feats, you're probably filling a lot with what's just available through here. This is stronger, in my opinion, than any of the other subclasses. This is an S. This is an amazing gunslinger class archetype to me. The options, the combinations of spells, and your shooting, and the way that the deeds work, this is all just really, really solid, and it fits a fantastic fantasy that you can try to do between, alchemical ammunition and other subclasses, but this one just does it better. The only thing I think I wouldn't take at all is probably Black Powder Embodiment, unless I expected to chase people a lot. I just usually don't want to teleport within 10 feet of a creature when I've got a 120 range on my gun, but hey, that's cool. One bad feat at super high levels is not going to affect this ranking. Let's see if we can keep the excitement going with the Ranger and the Vindicator. So, what's the angle here? First, this is your religious Ranger. So, you're going to get religion instead of nature, your spells are divine instead of primal, you have a deity, you are trained in your deity's favorite weapon, which gets the divine simplicity thing that increases the die size if it's just a simple weapon and not a martial weapon. Wisdom is used for your spells. Boom, all that laid out. Good stuff. With all that in mind, you also get an edge. So this is filling in your subclass, like we've had with Gunslinger and Barbarian. It's called Vindicator's Edge, and you get a +1 to your spell attack rolls against your hunted prey, and they have -1 to saves against your spells. So clearly we've got more Gish stuff going on. You'll notice a pattern. We got a lot of Gishy going on here. Vindicator's Mark, 2 actions. This is a focus spell, by the way. You make a spell attack roll at your hunted prey. On a hit, you deal 2d4 spirit damage, and it's marked in a special new way. And if it's invisible, it's only concealed to you. It takes an extra 2 damage from all of your strikes, and you can dismiss this as a free action on your turn if the last thing you did was deal damage to it, dealing like with a weapon or unarmed strike. That means not with a spell, causing it to explode on that creature and deal 2d6 more spirit damage. The damage, by the way, from this spell increases every 2 spell levels or 4 character levels and goes up a decent amount. 2d4 initial, 1 damage for every hit, and 1d6 at the end damage. Pretty decent numbers, even if it is every 2 spell levels it goes up, but it is a focus spell. Keep that in mind. At level 17, the bonuses for your plus to spell attack rolls against enemies and their minus to saves goes from +1s to +2 and -2. So nice little boost to those, which honestly you probably need because, again, you are a ranger, which means strength or dex is your primary ability score, not your wisdom. So on to the dedication and the feats. The dedication lets you use religion to handle various charisma-based skill actions, but only in places where your religion is recognized, pretty much. There's more detail in there, but that's the gist of it. How about the other feats? We've got Domain Initiate. This is actually at level 1, so you can take it right away with your class feat if you want to. You select a domain tied to your deity, and you get the initial focus spell from it, which also adds another focus point, which, considering you got a focus spell for getting your edge, you could have 2 focus points at level 1, and that's actually really good. Instructive Strike, level 4, 1 action. You can strike, and on a hit, you get to recall knowledge for free with a +2 bonus to your recall knowledge if it was a crit. Ongoing Investigation, level 4. You can move at full speed while investigating during exploration. Some of these, by the way, are feats that are available to other classes at different levels, but I won't be mentioning those. I'll just talk about it as relation to this class. Interrogate, level 6, 1 action. Basically, you make an intimidation check to get your questions answered, and depending on the creature, you get a bonus. They can still lie to you, but you'll have a better chance at knowing if they're lying if you do a good job on your roll. So, could be used in combat, but pretty much an out-of-combat thing. Thorough Research, level 6. When you succeed at recall knowledge, you get additional info. Crit success gives you even more. GMs, if somebody takes this, don't be stingy. Let them learn a whole bunch of stuff. That's the reason they did this. Make it fun for them. Make them the knowledge center for the class. Advanced Domain, level 8. You get the Advanced Domain focus spell tied to your domain you chose from Domain Initiated, which you had to take to get this. And you get another focus point. Silence the Profane, level 8, reaction. If you're using your deity's favored weapon and the creature is within its range and is casting a spell when you can strike. If you crit, you disrupt the spell, and on a hit, if it's a divine spell and it's your hunted prey, you disrupt it still. If you do hit with your reaction strike, hit or crit, the creature is off guard to you until the end of your next turn as well. So kind of a lot baked into this reaction. Vindicator's Judgment, level 10, 1 action. This is a focus spell. This is a fortitude save that the creature makes against your spell attack, or sorry, against your spell DC, and on anything other than crit success, it's going to get a debuff. How long it lasts and how good the debuff is depends on, of course, their level of success, but this is a kind of a weakness to your attacks debuff, so it can be really great, especially setting up early on. And finally, Call the Hunt, level 12, 1 action. Until the start of your next turn, if you and an ally are both within melee range of the prey, you don't have to be on opposite sides for it to be off guard to you, so flanking doesn't require you to be opposite sides of a creature, and you both gain any sanctification you have. So, you know, you've got a holy sanctification, you're fighting something that's unholy, any bonus you get, your ally is going to get it as well. This is another class archetype that's got a lot going on. The edge is solid, assuming that you plan to use a fair number of spells. Again, you chose this because you wanted to use spells, but the spells here are definitely different. These focus spells you get are probably going to make it worth it alone, like that edge, taking advantage of that with your focus spells, solid. You could take a lot of feats to take spells from your class as well, so just keep that in mind. You're not just tied to those, even though you didn't get like a wizard spellcaster or anything like that. You've got spells that are part of your class that you can take. I don't know that the feats are all fantastic here, though. There are several that work outside of combat, and that's not a bad thing, but they're not going to be useful to you inside of combat, and they're more, communication and social related. What this really comes down to is that it's much more difficult to use than the other two stronger edges, right? They're much easier to get a lot out of, hey, I can attack a whole bunch of times with not as much penalty, or hey, I can add more damage on. So those are the two stronger ones that I ranked. But I do think this gives a lot of power. It's just harder to use, and some of the feats are duds. All in all, I'm going to give this a B. I honestly tilted between B and A on this one. I actually do like it a lot. I just feel like some of what it's offering isn't amazing, and I think it could be hard to weave some of the spell stuff in here. And it does kind of lean you toward more of a melee build, but it doesn't have to be. It still can work. Just keep in mind that your mileage may vary with some of those feats. So B, but right there on the edge of an A that I've gone back and forth on a lot, and anybody could sway me, I think, either direction on this one. Okay, down to our last two. The whole reason I made this video, the Rogue, because I got a lot of comments about the Rogue. Let's dive in here. We got the Avenger and the Eldritch Trickster to do, and let's start with the Trickster because it is actually a racket and not a class archetype, but it does act differently from some of our other rackets, subclasses. The big thing is that you start by choosing the multi-class dedication for a spellcaster. So even though it's not a true class archetype, but it is kind of a class archetype. But anyway, you're going to choose that. So wizard, druid, cleric, what have you. And you get it at level 1 rather than waiting for it to be part of level 2. And this will inform the rest of what you get for pretty much everything to do with this racket. You get an alternate primary ability score. It'll be whatever the primary ability score for that class is. So druid, it'll be wisdom. Wizard, it'll be int, so on and so forth. Skill proficiencies. From the dedication you took, you get that skill proficiency. So wizard, arcana, druid, nature, blah, blah, blah. And you get your improved sneak attack option. Well, you don't get anything like that here. You just get the dedication. But remember, dedications do come with their own stuff, which means wizard, you're going to get a spellbook, you're going to get cantrips. Druid, you're going to get cantrips. You're going to get cantrips, right? Cantrips and spellcasting and all of that. So very cool here. Then we have the feats that relate to it. So we get all the feats are available to you from that dedication. I'm not going to put them here as like part of this, but you do get them, even though you could have taken a dedication at 2, so it only buys you so much. But those are available. As far as special feats that are part of this class for choosing the subclass, there's really only one, but I'm going to mention 2. The first is Magical Trickster. For you specifically, this is available at level 2. Now, all rogues can get it at level 4, but it's a level 2 for you, and it really relates to you more. If you succeed at a spell attack against an off-guard creature, you get to add your sneak attack damage. But if the spell would like somehow attack multiple times, it only triggers once. But still, adding sneak attack to spell attack rolls is really, really cool. And then you get Eldritch Debilitations at level 10. Working off your debilitations like everybody else gets, you get to choose from 2 new options, like all of these. Your options are, the target is stupefied 1, or the target can't step. This is another really interesting option for rogues. What I keep struggling with is how this is much different from just taking a different rogue subclass and then just taking a spellcasting dedication at level 2. Even without free archetype, you could do this. The only real difference here is that you get the Eldritch Debilitations options, which I do like. The removal of a step may sound minimal, but if you remove the ability to step from a creature that's up next to an ally that has reactive strikes, well, now they just simply can't leave or they're going to get beaten up, right? Because step is the way that you avoid taking that reactive strike. They can't do that now. That's great. Stupefied 1, against a spellcaster, just being able to trigger Stupefied without them getting any save is great, because a lot of times to trigger Stupefied, they get some sort of mental save especially. You don't want them to get a will save, right? You just cause it, which makes them significantly weaker with their actions and also easier to target with your other spellcasters. So I do like those. Now, I don't think this is higher than a B just because it doesn't offer a ton of stuff here other than something you could have taken already at level 2. So I don't want to oversell it, but I also don't want to undersell it. Honestly, for the type of character it is, if you want to be a Gishy rogue, this is a great way to do it. Yes, you can do it with some of the other ones. Scoundrel could very easily be, for instance, a Gishy sorcerer rogue, but this one does give you stuff a little sooner, and I do like that you kind of get access to the spellcasting a little bit earlier. The Eldritch Debilitations are solid. Good B, lives right there with Scoundrel for me. Okay, our last one. Yes, I know this has been a long video. That's just what it is. I won't have to do a catch-up again, by the way. In the future, I'm just going to add class archetypes into my videos so we don't have to do this kind of catch-up thing. But let's catch up and finish it off with the Avenger. This is a class archetype. It's going to give you a lot for level 1. First, you're going to choose a deity. You get trained in their special weapon and their skill, and you get medium armor. You're also trained in intimidation, religion, and stealth. Finally, you can use sneak attack with the favored weapon that you chose, even if it doesn't usually fit the sneak attack mold, and it gains critical specialization when used against off-guard creatures, which is mostly what you're going to want to attack against anyway. And it increases in proficiency alongside your other weapons, so it'll always stay up. So even if it's, choose your poison, if it's some big bludgeoning weapon, it'll still count if that's your deity's favored weapon. You can choose Strength as your primary ability score with this, and you get the Hunt Prey action, but you lose Surprise Attack feature. The Surprise Attack feature, of course, is pretty good, but Hunt Prey is also good, so it's a fairly even trade in my mind. And that's a lot of changes already. So what about the dedication? Well, at level 2, the dedication is going to give a +1 status bonus to saves against divine spells and effects, and anything that deals spirit damage to you. You can also use religion for various non-combat activities that normally require intimidation, deception, all that stuff, since you're going to be leaning into strength pretty heavily here. So what are the feats available? Well, a lot of these are ranger feats. As you kind of noticed with the Hunt Prey, there's kind of a ranger combo thing going on here. Twin Takedown, this is level 4, 1 action. You get with, and this is big on dual wielding, by the way. So 2 weapons equipped, get to make 2 strikes, 1 with each weapon, for 1 action against your hunted prey. It's always been a solid feat. Twin Parry, level 4, 1 action, still wielding 2 weapons. You get a +1 bonus to your AC until the start of your next turn, or +2 if one of the weapons has the parry trait. Zealous Inevitability, this is level 6, 1 action, special to this class archetype. Using your deity's weapon, you strike, and on a hit, you give the creature the doomed 1 or increase its doomed condition by 1. This, specific for you, reduces their saves to divine spells by the doomed value, and if the creature would become doomed 4, they get a save with the incapacitation trait to not die, because normally at doomed 4, you die. Silence the Profane, level 8, this is a reaction. If you're using your deity's divine favored weapon, and the creature is within its range, and is casting a spell, and you strike. If you crit, you disrupt the spell. If you hit, you disrupt it if it's divine or hunted prey. You've heard this one before. We already talked about it with one of our other class archetypes. Shadow of Death, level 10. Strikes with your deity's weapon against doomed targets have the death trait, meaning if they hit 0, game over. They're dead. They're not coming back. They're just gone. Slay, level 12, 2 actions. The target has to be doomed 2 or more. If you hit, you deal an extra 4d6 precision damage to the target, but they get a basic fortitude save with the incapacitation trait. If they crit fail, they die. Regardless, they are immune to 24 hours after you use this, but it can be a straight kill. Twin Riposte, level 12. This is a reaction if you have Twin Parry active and a creature critically fails a strike against you, you can strike or disarm them. Second Sting, level 14, 1 action. You have to be dual wielding, kind of been the flavor of this whole thing. You strike with one of the weapons, and if you miss, you deal damage equal to the other weapon's damage, but not with any dice. So just like the straight strength bonus plus expertise bonuses and things like that. Improved Twin Riposte, level 16. Now, as long as you have Twin Riposte, you get the benefits of Twin Riposte without needing to have Twin Parry up. So you don't have to have that going. You can just use your reaction to attack. Great. That's actually really helpful. But again, creatures have to critically fail a strike against you. This is quite the mix. You get some divine aspects, but they come across with more the doomed than with spells, so this is actually not truly Gishy. This is about doomed and dual wielding. The medium armor and strength are, they're nice. They're a good combo here. Finding a deity with a weapon that you like is probably not that hard, so you can find a cool main hand weapon here. This is absolutely a dual wield, though, so you really need to go into dual wielding. There's kind of like 2 paths with the feats, but you're probably taking a lot of both. So you're getting the Doom path and the Parry Riposte path. You can, again, take enough to get both because you can use class feats, and if you're doing free archetype, those feats as well. You rarely see Doomed come up for player characters. It's really cool that you get to play with Doomed. The Divine debuff applied to the Doom condition will only matter if your the team has some access to it. So like if you've got a cleric or one of many other divine casters, they could probably take great advantage of this. Otherwise, it probably won't be the most amazing, but you still get some really great features here. It doesn't feel like there's wasted features. The Doomed may not always be great. Keep in mind, it does help creatures die faster, but if knocking them out to 0 ends it anyway, maybe not as big a deal. So it's going to have some mileage that varies depending on your campaign, which is why it drops down from an A, sadly, to a B, just because Doomed may not matter a whole lot for every campaign. If you had to do death saves for creatures in all campaigns, this would be an A for me, but it drops down to a B just because of that. Sadly, you don't get special debilitations or other feats in the class like you do for the rogues, but everything else here is pretty cool, and it is a different playstyle. I like that it leans the dual wield. It's got a good reason to do that. So do think about it. I do like it. It's just not blowing me away, but it is still quite good. And that's it. Finally, we are done with all of our catch-up for class archetypes. Hooray for that. I'm going to go and look back at multi-class archetypes while I finish those out, and when I'm planning out the rest of my class videos, I'm going to include these class archetypes up front so I don't have to do this. While I look at all of that, I hope you consider building some of these, especially a Spellshot, because they're amazing. And as always, adventure on.